10 seconds.
Welcome to Clever Title Pending, a proud member of the Rising Tide Broadcast Network. We talk to creatives about creativity and the business behind them. So type in your questions and become part of the conversation. And now, here's your host, Brian K. Morris.
Good evening and welcome to Clever Title Pending. How the heck are you? Welcome to the Tuesday, August 3rd, 2021 edition. We've got a really cool guest. Yes, the people outside are honking. They're so excited. Yes, we've got the window open. It's that cool for once. But anyway, thank you for being here. We've got a terrific guest tonight, Charles Santino, who has had a really interesting career. And he's got a brand new comic he's putting out right now called Rammur, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that somehow. But anyway, folks, you'll learn more about Charles and his creations, note the plural, as the show unfolds. But first of all, we've got to get our thank yous out of the way gratefully. And the first one goes to our sponsor of this show, Plasma Fire Graphics. Plasma Fire Graphics, when the look of your book matters to you. We want to thank Jeffrey Hayes for his ongoing sponsorship of our Rising Tide programs. And I don't get tired of that trailer there or the music. And folks aren't going to get tired of your covers if you check out Plasma Fire Graphics and what they can do for you. They can do wraparound covers, comic book covers, graphics to help you sell your stuff, as well as beautiful trailers like the one you just saw. Who do you think did my book trailers? Oh, yes, indeedy. Plus, he's affordable, obviously, because I used him to make my book trailers. Anyway, he's fantastic to work with, very creative. Check out his stuff on Facebook as well as plasmafiregraphics.com. He's a genius, and put that genius to work for you. Plasma Fire Graphics, when the look of your book matters to you, because it matters to your readers. In fact, I'm looking for readers, and that's why Jeffrey Hayes did this cover here, Snow Ambition, number 4 in the Snow Short series, created by Bobby Nash, who will be on the show next week with Charles F. Millhouse. So get ready for another 4-hour show. It's going to be fun. Anyway, go to Amazon.com where you can pick up this quick read crime thriller for only 99 cents, or to BobbyNash.com. It's a lot of fun. You'll dig it. And while we're thanking people, let's thank our patrons at Patreon. Patreon is a monthly subscription service where you can support your favorite creators directly and for a nominal fee. And believe me, every bit helps. It's not a little amount. Every bit helps. But in return, you get rewards, things that people won't see, but only our patrons will. So check out what we're offering at www.patreon.com/Brian K. Morris. Also, while you're checking out stuff, check out the Rising Tide Broadcast Network. We've got your entertainment and information covered 7 days a week. And tomorrow morning, we'll have me on again with Nevermind the Furthermore, live creative conversation and coffee. And then tomorrow night will be the return of Ted Davies and Glenn B. Fleming on The Truth Mongers. Great show investigating myths, modern myths, and otherwise good stuff. Conspiracy theories. You're going to enjoy it. It's a great show. But anyway, check out our Facebook page and subscribe to it if you will. In fact, if you're watching us live, please give us a reaction. Thumbs up on YouTube, a like on Facebook. And if you're on Facebook on any platform, please like the page you're watching on. So thank you to our hosts. Also, please, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. We've got all kinds of great programming coming up, and you will be notified when it arrives. We look forward to having you here. And I think I have gone through all the thank yous. Now all that remains is to bring out our very, very special guest. He is a writer. He has worked for various companies such as Marvel Comics, Marcosia, Fantagraphics, and currently he has put out his own new book, Rammur #1, and it's currently on Indiegogo right now. And we're going to bring him out here and have him talk about himself. So get your questions ready, folks, because we've got the one, the only Mr. Charles Santino. Charles, how are you tonight, sir? I'm not. Did I unmute you there?
There we go.
There we go. My bad, Charles. Sorry about that.
That's okay. I had to unmute myself.
That's cool. We're putting you to work. I know the first thing you get here is like, what kind of host is this? Good Lord. But anyway, we're glad. Now, how is your title character pronounced? Let's make sure I get it right.
It is Rammur, and we'll start out with a little story about why it's spelled that way.
Yeah, please.
Originally, I wanted Rammur with an ER.
Mm-hmm.
But I also wanted the name of the character to be an available web address. So I looked up that web address, Rammur with an E, and it was taken by a company in Finland that manufactures heavy equipment for construction.
Oh, wow.
So I thought, okay, well, how about if I spell it Rammar? That would still be pronounced about the same. I checked that web address out, and that is a chain of grocery stores in Turkey. So that was not available. And I thought, okay, I'm running out of vowels here. Let's try Rammur. That was available. I grabbed it, and that's why the character's name is the way it is, which is okay because it takes place in the future. So
yeah,
a little bit of weirdness is not a bad thing. And I did discover when I tried to create a Facebook page for it that, bless you,
thank you.
That name is actually, I think it's a first name of a bunch of people in India, maybe Pakistan. I think India.
Oh.
So it's actually a name. So that's why I called the Facebook page for that Rammur and Tops Tales of the Police State, which is a comic within the comic of Rammur. So there'd be no confusion with anybody named Rammur who had their own Facebook page. So that's why it's UR. I would say about 5% of the people who attempt the pronunciation say Rammur, and most people are saying Rammur because it's easier.
Right.
And but I'm pronouncing it Rammur, and so that's what we're going to go with.
Well, that's good. That's good. Well, I tell people I can mispronounce Bob. So I understand. And don't look now, but Tops is a supermarket chain in the Northeast. But
yes,
anyway.
I know. I'm in the Northeast. I know about that. Yes.
Oh, what part of the country are you in?
Upstate New York, near Albany.
Ah, my in-laws are from Buffalo.
Oh, okay. Yeah, where they get literally twice as much snow as we do.
As well they should.
Yeah,
so
we get about 5 feet in the winter, and they get about 10.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, and that's why we only visit them in the spring and summer.
Yes. Yeah, as the pioneers used to say, if summer comes on a weekend this year, we'll have a picnic.
Exactly. Well, Charles, I've gabbed long enough. I'm going to give you the floor and the spotlight here. Tell everyone who you are and why you are so amazing.
I don't know why I'm amazing, but I've been around quite a while. Started out as a writer, doing work for Marvel, including Conan and the humor book, and Savage Tales Volume 2, doing those manly adventure stories for that anthology, and did some more humor for Fantagraphics, and then moved into graphic novels like the Western Louis Lamour, Law of the Desert Born, the Ayn Rand adaptation of Anthem for Penguin. Law of the Desert Born was for Bantam. And now Marcosia, this is my third project with them. Rammur is my third project with Marcosia, the British publisher. And they're just doing a digital of the so-called floppies, and they will do a collection in trade paperback after about 3 issues. But they've allowed me to crowdfund the individual issues of Rammur and print and distribute them as I see fit, which is pretty amazing thing for them to do. Harry Marcos runs Marcosia, and nobody has anything bad to say about Harry Marcos. He's really been quite a benefactor to me.
That's awesome. That's I think it shows the importance. I firmly believe that crowdfunding is turning into the new arm of distribution for comics, for physical comics, and for digital as well. And I'm seeing other publishers, like SourcePoint Press does it. I think Dynamite Entertainment does it. Crowdfunds all are part of their offerings too. So
yeah, it was
I think
pretty
that's
interesting.
pretty cool.
It was pretty interesting when Archie tried to crowdfund a book, and they caught a lot of heat for that, because it was kind of still at the beginning of crowdfunding, and the general feeling of the public was, hey, why are you crowdfunding something? Why don't you just publish it? And I think they did pull the crowdfunding on that and just went ahead and published whatever they were going to publish. But for people like myself and a lot of people who don't have that kind of corporate entity behind them, we go direct to the public and see what we can raise.
Oh yeah. And SourcePoint Press, for instance, isn't a huge outfit. It's not, on everyone's lips like DC or Marvel or Image might be. So, and even, like Marcosia, I know of their stuff. In fact, a buddy of mine was one of their editors, but I think it's cool. I read Rammur, and I think it is a wonderful, wonderful book. It has a very European feel to it.
Yeah, that's not intentional, except that I'm certainly influenced by a lot of European stuff. And that kind of reminded me when you mentioned that. I don't know if you're familiar with the band Talking Heads.
Oh, yeah.
Now, when their first album came out in 1977, I knew nothing about them. I'd never heard of them, and a song of theirs was played on the radio from their first album. I was in Albany at the time, and it was New Feeling from their first album.
Yes.
And I thought they were a British band, because not that there were no British accents, but so many British bands don't have accents when they record and sing. Right. But they just had their approach, their sensibility had a European feel to it. So I'm certainly influenced by the British comics and the French comics and the Italian comics, and it's not intentional. I don't sit down and say, well, I want to do something that looks or feels like their stuff. It just kind of permeates, and you don't really have any control over it. And it's interesting that you're one of the first people to spot that and to mention it. But I did go for a very simple animated style. Paulo Perez is the main artist. And I said, take a look at the Batman stuff that DC did from the 90s, the animated tie-ins.
Yeah.
And that's the feel I'm looking for. This is certainly not for kiddies, but it's not a hard R. I would say it's a hard, if anything, a hard PG-13. Yeah. There's no gore. Any sex takes place off camera. The cussing is limited to hell and damn. So it's certainly not for little kids, but 13 or over, not going to have any problem with this.
Right. No, yeah, definitely. That's one thing I think the industry can certainly use more of, and that's stuff that you shouldn't be afraid to leave on the kitchen table just in case the kids are around. I think we have a dearth of that.
The material is mature in that Rammur is a kind of cold-blooded character, and it might be a little shocking. Some people have been shocked at some of his actions in these stories, because he doesn't go out of his way to kill somebody, but if you are in his way and you have the potential to maybe reveal to the authorities who he is, or a little bit too much, or you're just getting in the way of him obtaining his goals, which are pretty simple: women and money.
Right.
In that order. that's about the size of it, and he will not hesitate to kill somebody that he feels needs to be killed. But he's not a psycho.
Right.
He doesn't have a bloodlust. He's just a hardened criminal, and don't get in his way.
Yeah, I like that, and I appreciate the approach to this. Like I said, because I dug the old heavy metals, especially like back in the 70s and 80s, and this looked like something that could just easily fall into those pages, which I hope you'll take as a compliment. I'm putting you in there with Jean Giraud and everybody. So
certainly big fan of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I have recently pitched something to them that is probably of the same sensibility as Rammur. I think it probably would seem like it came from the same person, the same mind. But I don't know. I don't really understand quite what they're about right now. I've always found it very difficult to figure out what, especially an anthology title, is looking for. When I pitched to Savage Tales Volume 2, which was edited by Larry Hama, I did a Jack London pastiche, which is a fancy word for ripoff. but he's in the public domain, so that was okay, and that was immediately accepted. Mm-hmm. And then for What the Humor magazine, I pitched a parody of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Ninja Mutant Turtles, and that was immediately accepted, probably because of that tie-in. But for every story I've had accepted, I probably have, without exaggeration, about 20 stories that have not been accepted. So it's a real crapshoot. You don't know. You can't read the minds of the editors and know what they're going to accept.
That's true. That's very, very true. Well, first, real fast, we're going to get into some of your influences and such. But folks, if you look down at the crawl, eventually the web address for Indiegogo and the Rammur #1 campaign will show up. Please give it a look and check it out. There's where does Rammur #1 stand in Indiegogo? What part of the campaign are we in?
We're in demand now.
Okay.
So, and everything that was part of the campaign proper during the campaign is still available, which is pretty limited. I kept the perks pretty simple. And the only thing that's going to go away rather quickly is original sketches done by Paulo Perez, because I can't have him shipping them one at a time from Brazil. So
yeah,
he's working on a bunch of them right now, and he will probably ship them sometime in September to me. So there's still time for anybody who wants that perk right now. If you just go to Indiegogo and type in Rammur, Rammur, you'll find it very quickly.
Or if you go here,
there it is.
Anyway, check it out. Yeah, check it out. Type in Rammur with a U, or follow this link, and you will get to where you need to be. And while we're doing this, we want to say hello to Carl Witzman, Dan Hollifield of Last Man Standing on the Rising Tide Broadcast Network. Always glad to have you here. And I'm not going to shush Donna Carleen. Carleen, thank you very much for being here. And everyone's saying hello to each other. They will ignore us after a certain point. So don't panic, Charles. And Andy Bove, good to see you. Cindy Cap, good evening. Her internet connection is up and down like a yo-yo, so if she disappears all of a sudden, we'll understand. And there we go. And this means she likes you, Charles. This means she likes you.
Oh,
prepare yourself.
fantastic.
Why are thieves bad at getting jokes? Because they always take things literally.
That's a dad joke.
That's a very dad joke. We are the storage unit for dad jokes here, and we love them. Fortunately, a pastiche, says Carl Witzman, who is a very talented author himself. That's what we need to do, Dan. A pastiche of Doctor Who. There you go. And Cindy, we will get to your question in a moment after we say hello. I think that's okay. We've got thieves broke into a house and stole a big vault, says Cindy Cat, but it's only filled with big rocks. Thieves are getting bolder and bolder.
Did you hear about the restaurant on the moon?
No, I didn't, Charles.
Great food, no atmosphere.
Why do I feel like I'm going to get caught in the middle here of a joke off here? But anyway, I love it. And Cindy had a question here. But first of all, while I'm looking for it, Charles, tell us about your creative journey, where you started out in life, and what
Sure.
made you decide to become a writer and also a packager of comic
Yes.
material. What
Yeah,
led you down that path?
Yeah, and that's part of that journey because at a certain point I just got sick of other people being the boss of me.
Amen, brother. Amen.
Yeah. But I have a question first. I wonder, is it possible to show the promo video, which is at the website?
Yeah, I've got the website up here. I was going to make that happen.
Okay, then we can get to that down the road. I just want to make sure it's on the agenda.
Yeah, it's on the agenda. In fact, let's see. Let me hit that. I talk to myself, so I make sure I'm doing it right. And here we go. In fact, let me see here. All right. Tell you what I'm going to do. Let's play this now, and then we'll get your life story.
Sounds good.
Then let's see. There we go. Add to stream. Give the whole screen. That wasn't what's supposed to happen. There we go. And here we go. We're going to start it right now.
There we
That
go.
is nifty.
Yeah, as you can see, I've done the heavy lifting for Cartoon Network, for Adult Swim. Anytime they're ready, I've done all the work for them. They just have to put the contract in front of me.
There you go. Operators are standing by. Did you put that together, or
That was put together by the artist Marco Perugini, Italian artist, who did 2 stories in Rammur #1. He did the backup 6-page Rammur story and Topps Tales of the Police State story, and I gave him all the art by Paulo Perez, my main artist and the cover artist, and I said make a video, and I gave him the music. I'm not a big heavy metal fan, but that music just seemed to work for the video.
that rocks? That was good stuff. I dig it. But so anyway, that's what you got to look forward to, people. There's a lot there to unpack. It's a good story. Charles sent me a preview of it, and it is nifty. I seriously liked it. I really did. But anyway, let's talk about your journey, your life story.
Sure.
What brought you to this point, Charles? Where were you born, and what got you into writing and packaging comics?
Born in Astoria, Queens, and grew up on Long Island, and went to school in Albany, New York, and worked briefly in New York City after that, working for a variety of publishers, and then moved back upstate, where I've been ever since. And as so many people, started their careers reading comics and loving comics and saying, "Hey, I think maybe I can do this." At about 12 or 13, I realized I was not going to be pitching for the Yankees. That was probably not going to happen. So I thought, well, maybe I could write these comic books. And eventually I started pitching stuff to them, and eventually got accepted. And probably the best advice I ever got from a comic book person, an editor, was Larry Rammur, who bought my first stories and said, you need to write more. Just write more and more and more and more, and you'll get better and better and better. And Chuck Dixon came up at exactly the same time in the same magazines, pitching to Larry.
Yeah.
And he had the advantage of being a better writer. He was so prolific and so in tune to what they wanted that they gave him Conan eventually, and he started doing backup stories for Savage Sword of Conan. And Larry tells a story about how he got Conan, how he got the Savage Sword main story. Larry took him to lunch and wasn't going to give him the book, but said to him, "What, in your view, Chuck, what are the Conan stories about?" And he had one word: cruelty.
Yeah. Ooh.
And Larry said, "Okay, you're the new writer on Savage Sword."
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Huh.
So it's tough because there's a lot of competition, especially if you're a writer and not an artist, because a lot of publishers and editors feel that writers are interchangeable. They're a dime a dozen, and if you can operate a typewriter, you can be a writer.
Yeah.
If you can draw and you can draw well, that distinguishes you, and that's a tougher skill to find. When the market collapsed in the mid-90s, I got out and I decided if I was going to come back, it would be as a packager, putting together whole projects. And shortly after that, the market changed quite a bit, so that mainstream publishers like Bantam and Penguin were publishing graphic novels.
Right.
And my background was in mainstream publishing, so I thought, well, I know these people. I know how to pitch to them. I know how to sell to them. I've been inside their Forbidden City working as an assistant editor.
Yeah.
So I was pretty successful in pitching projects to them because I understood what they were looking for. And they were certainly more professional than the comic book publishers and the editors at the comic book publishers. So I was a lot more at home pitching to them.
Yeah. Well, you say more professional. Do you want to go into a little more detail about that? As like a mainstream publisher of comic books, and I say mainstream like big publishing house, versus somebody that is solely devoted to comics like Marvel or DC or one of those companies.
Well, the comic book companies generally are run by fanboys who know comics. They were fans, and so they started working for the publishers, the comic book publishers, and a lot of them don't have a whole lot of social or people skills. And the acquiring editors at the mainstream publishers were book people, and they had a little bit more business sense and a little bit more people sense than the comic book editors. One of my Facebook posts that I've repeated a number of times is throwing the question out there: what's the dumbest thing an editor has ever said to you? And the strictly comic book editors, and the response was amazing. What I offered, something that was told to me, I threw this question out at a post convention dinner. And somebody who shall remain unnamed, but is a pretty well-known writer, was pitching a Batman story to DC Comics, and he was told by the editor. He said, "Well, this story, the twist to this story, it's a cliche, and we don't do cliches at DC."
Thank God I'll sing down for that one.
Yeah, and Chuck Dixon, again, Chuck related something that somebody else had told him. I forget who it was, but he did chime in on my Facebook post. The dumbest thing he was ever told was he pitched an idea to an editor. It was either Marvel or DC, and he was told, we'll use that idea when we need a home run.
Wow.
Yeah. Like,
Holy
when
crap.
don't you need a home run?
Yeah. Like
At
12 times a year.
At what point
Yeah.
don't you need a home run?
Joke.
But Chuck
Wow.
analyzed this very astutely, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Editors are a cowardly lot, and they don't know how to say no. They don't know how to say, I just didn't like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't know how to do that. One of the first editors I worked for in mainstream publishing, now keep in mind this was 1980. She was already 77 years old. Okay.
Wow.
Now in 1980, 77 was a hell of a lot older than it is today.
Yeah.
She was one of the 28 editors that rejected Gone with the Wind.
Oh, wow.
And she said, I just didn't like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But comic book editors, they don't know how to say it just didn't grab me. It just didn't appeal to me. Because
Yeah.
I think in many cases they're afraid of starting a conversation. And they don't want to start that conversation. Well, why didn't you like it? Maybe I can change something. It's just not for me. It's fine. I would much prefer that to, some of the ridiculous things that I've heard. I had one editor that said to me after 2 years of sitting on a story at Marvel, said, well, at least I haven't rejected it.
Wow. That's
years.
cold comfort.
2 years. Yeah.
2 years. Holy cow. Wow.
So yeah. And I found that mainstream publishing was far more in line with my sensibility. The other thing I'm doing right now is doing a bunch of webcomics for the Edgar Rice Burroughs people.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of them on their website on a subscription service. And dealing with the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate, dealing with Jim Sulos and his people, is much more like dealing with a mainstream publisher than it is like dealing with a comic book publisher. They have that professional sensibility that is almost completely lacking in comic book companies.
Oh yeah. Yeah, even on the fringes, I am. I've heard enough stories, and the thing is, there was a day, going back to the editorial thing, there was a day when somebody like a Stan Lee or a Julia Schwartz would say, "I don't like that. I reject that story." But now you hear tales about writers or artists who basically will go along with their editor as long as their editor like greenlights everything they want to do, whether it's right or wrong.
A good editor is so important. If you look at the fantastic costume designs of the Marvel Age characters of the Silver Age, you can credit the artists for that, but you have to credit Stan Lee because we're not seeing what he rejected in most cases, although some of this stuff has been published. If you've seen the horrible, atrocious first design for the Black Panther.
Yes, Cold Tiger.
It's terrible. It's terrible, aside from the stupid name.
Yeah.
It's the costume design is terrible. And I don't think any of Kirby's costume designs when he went to DC after Marvel were nearly as good because he wasn't really being edited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Stan Lee he had a great eye, and he was a great editor. Unfortunately, he takes credit for creating a lot of things that he had nothing to do with.
Right.
But he certainly is at least 50% responsible, if not a smidge more, for what happened at Marvel in the 60s. I mean, how many Spider-Man costumes are we not seeing that were rejected until Steve Ditko ultimately came up with what he came up with. The issue, the latest issue of Alter Ego is about Jack Kirby, and Stan Lee mentions in there, I don't know when the interview is from, but he talks about how he was never happy with the Iron Man costume design, and that's why it kept changing.
Right. Yeah, it's wow. It's amazing, because I remember that Jack Kirby was supposed to have taken a shot at what eventually became Spider-Man, and it sounded more like The Fly or Captain Marvel.
Exactly.
And the costume was it was hideous, frankly, even by Kirby standards.
I would be generous and call it unremarkable.
Yeah, your kindness is duly noted, sir.
Yeah. And that, again, that's Stan Lee. Stan Lee was able to steer the ship.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't draw, but he could art direct.
Exactly.
And getting into packaging,
mm-hmm.
That's part of being a packager.
Mm-hmm.
Is being a writer, being a creator, being an art director, being in charge of the production, and it's a lot. It's definitely a lot to be responsible for.
Right.
But as I've said many times, I'd rather make my own mistakes than somebody else's mistakes.
Well, as I always say, that whether you work for somebody else or you work for yourself, the boss is always an idiot. So that's at least my experience at it. Now, getting to the packaging, that's quite just the two that come off the top of my head: Ayn Rand and Louis Lamour.
Now with Ayn Rand, I was 100% the packager.
Okay.
With Louis Lamour, Beau Lamour, his son, was a serious collaborator. I mean, he wrote the screenplay on which my script was based.
Oh.
And he was really the art director on that. Mm-hmm. But he was brand new to comics. Mm-hmm. So he listened to what I said, and he learned as much as I did. I learned a lot about writing a more complex story than I'd ever written before, and he learned about the language of comics. When I read the screenplay, there were a lot of great moments in it that would work really well in a movie because it was a screenplay, and usually it was stuff that would never work in a comic. It was real subtleties of body language and gestures and a look and stuff that you can do so well in a movie that does not work at all in comics. Right. And there were 4 or 5 places in the screenplay where I pointed out to Beau, I said, this is great, but it's not going to work. We need to come up with something that will work in a comic book. So I would say that I acted as a kind of co-packager on that. But with Ayn Rand, which Joe Staton drew, I delivered a finished product with almost no editorial input.
Interesting. Now, did you deal with like the estate of Ayn Rand, or
no? The publisher did. Penguin. I approached Penguin, and interestingly, the Ayn Rand material is handled by Penguin's romance editor, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting because when I handed the book to Joe Staton and told him to read it and told him I wanted him to draw it, he said, I want to approach this as a teen romance. And I said, that's exactly right. That's the way to approach this story. So I never dealt with the estate at all. I dealt with Penguin 100%.
Oh, interesting. And for the people who don't know, Joe Staton had a long career in comics, drawing everything from Scooby-Doo to Superman to the Justice Society, co-created Huntress, did a lot of E-Man, one of my favorite comics ever, and is currently drawing the Dick Tracy newspaper strip.
Which he's been doing for, it's got to be 8 or 9 years, something.
Oh, like that. Yeah. And then before that, he did Scooby-Doo for DC Comics for
a long
like
time.
10 or 12. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And speaking of bringing this back, art directing, Joe Staton was the first person to draw Rammur.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I read the stuff you sent. Yeah.
He did the first design when the character was conceived completely differently, and it was actually pitched to publishers in the mid-90s, and I didn't realize the market was in free fall, and I couldn't figure out why we weren't even getting responses. I was not a name, but Joe Staton was a name, and we couldn't get the time of day, and then I found out what was going on. And so I kind of put Rammur in a drawer, brought it out, as I thought it was going to be a webcomic. And I hired Andrew Wendell, who did a bunch of stuff for Valiant in the 90s.
Remember.
And he did his own take on Rammur.
Mhm.
And he did a lot of things that I didn't tell him to do, but that I liked quite a bit in redesigning him. But it never flew. He just couldn't produce pages at a rate that was fast enough, although the work was tremendous.
Mhm.
And then put it back in the drawer, took it out, and brought it back to Joe Staton. Joe Staton did a mix where he took his first design and Andrew's design, and that was pretty good. And then, but he wasn't available because of Dick Tracy and other commitments. So I found Paulo Perez, a Brazilian artist, and I said, "Here's everything. Basically, we need Joe Staton's design, but I think we want to have a trench coat. That the trench coat is science fictional in that it lengthens and shortens into the bolero jacket that he wears when he's in action,
Mhm.
and a trench coat when he's just kind of walking down the street trying to hide the gear that he's wearing, his wrist blasters, his leg jets, all powered by hydrogen, by a fusion reactor, a compact fusion reactor on his back and a ram scoop on his chest, hence his name, Rammur.
Right.
And I believe he's the first hydrogen-powered superhero. Clean energy for people who care about such things.
There you go. Doesn't leave fingerprints or a carbon footprint.
No.
So there you
the
go.
The only byproducts of fusion is the energy itself and a little bit of water.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's cool. Now, how has Rammur changed aside from visually, from his initial inception to today, to printed form?
Initially, it was a much lighter, humorous story along the lines of some of Philip Jose Farmer's lighter stuff, and maybe even a little bit of E-Man. So Rammur was a worker on a spaceship who was captured by a bunch of aliens, and they implanted this gear into him for reasons which I don't even remember anymore. But so it was kind of surgically implanted in him. So that was the first conception of the character.
Mhm.
And then later I wrote a novel that he appeared in that was never published, where he was a statue. He was a corporate mascot. He looked the same as he did earlier with Joe Staton's design, but he was a corporate mascot that was brought to life kind of in a Pygmalion fashion by a bored space goddess.
Oh, wow.
So that was his second inception. He was just kind of an automaton. And then he ultimately became a master thief in a future police state.
There we go. Good.
And that's where we are now.
Cool. Now, you say that you had an idea. You had an idea for a novel. Is there a chance you'll write that novel and maybe crowdfund it and publish it yourself?
It's written, but I don't like it. I don't have the patience for extended prose. Some comic book writers have made that leap, but there's only so many hours in the day, and maybe if there were 48 hours in a day, I might have the time to further develop that skill. But no, it's probably going to stay in the drawer where I think it deserves to be right now.
I understand that feeling. We've got some more comments here. Carl Witzman says, "We'll ignore you after a certain point." I think we started out that way. That's true. I lost them from the start.
I don't know what that means.
Well, we talked about how our audience is like in their own little discussion bubble.
Apparently.
And we are just kind of observing them. So
yeah.
So it's just a natural thing. Don't take it personally. They're ignoring me, not you. Cindy Kemp would like to know, which Muppet is Rammur most like?
Oh, that's easy.
Okay.
Cookie Monster.
Good choice. Good choice.
The single-mindedness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's true. That's yeah. I can dig that. I can dig that. That's great. Cindy Kemp then says the movie theater in my town was recently robbed of over $20,000 of merchandise. The thieves apparently stole 5 popcorn soda combos and 10 boxes of Raisinets. And Carl Witzman, a great author himself, says great promo. I like how it stayed in the comic boxes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very attractively done. And Cindy Kemp asks, Cindy, who recently had her very own successful crowdfunding campaign and put out her very first comic book, Animal
nice.
Eye. It is. It's good stuff.
I love that cover. Can I show that cover a little? Get a little closer.
Yeah, let me fill up the screen with this brilliance here. I think you're going to like it, Charles. But let me move her comments so you get the full effect here. But
oh, I like that a lot.
Yeah, and then you open it up. See how that wing kind of.
Yep. Yeah, I love the blue sky.
Yeah, great color choices.
You can't go wrong with a blue sky with some clouds in it.
Exactly. And one of my buddies who helps me with my covers tells me that shade of blue is like very attractive to people who are buying. And I want to give the guy credit. Roll Cruz is the artist on this, and Cindy Kemp is the writer based on her novel. And she this was basically, she did 2 drafts of a script. Got some feedback from it, and basically the 3rd draft went straight to her editor because it was that good. She got it that quickly. I'm very proud of her. Yes, I helped a little. So
she had a question.
Yes, she did. Yeah. I was getting to it. I'm in charge here. I know what we're doing here, Charles. Trust me. It may not look like it. I'm smarter than I look. No, Cindy Kemp wants to know, what was the hardest part of crowdfunding for you?
That's easy.
Yeah.
Everything.
That narrows it down.
Everything. It's just so time consuming. Mm-hmm. It took me, I don't know, 4 days, probably 4 nights anyway, to just load everything into Indiegogo before I launched, and getting the pictures sized properly was the website is not very intuitive. Mm-hmm. And it took me a lot of trial and error to get everything loaded in there. And then I got a notice 6 months later, because I hadn't launched yet, saying, well, you better launch, because if you don't, we're going to wipe this out.
Oh, no.
So I thought, well, that's okay, because I was planning on launching right now, so I'm gonna launch, because I was looking for a 60-day window. Right. Where I could actually have time to manage the campaign. Mm-hmm. But in trying to find people to interview you and do the interviews and do the promotion on Facebook and Instagram a little bit and Twitter a little bit, it's very, very, very time consuming. And I decided for my own sanity to keep the perks limited to a real minimum. You know who Philip Russert is?
Oh yeah, sure I do.
Yeah, I mean he just did, I don't know if it was 19 or 24 covers for his crowdfunding.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have the time to administrate that. So I went with 1 cover, and there is an alternate cover that was the cover of Rammur number 0, which was a free promo. And that alternate cover is inside, but there's 1 cover, and it didn't seem to hurt me. I don't know if all these bells and whistles really pay off. And in terms of merchandise, there's sketches, which is not really merchandise, original art, and a poster is one of the perks, and the poster and the art. And all of that with the comic, and that's it. So there's 4 options, and like I said, part of it was just to keep it sane for myself, so that I could administrate it. And I decided that I would make that limitation a virtue, the virtue of simplicity. But if Cindy has a follow-up question, because I probably have not gotten specific enough for her. But I would say every part of it is really hard. the easiest thing for me was coming up with a comic to crowdfund. That was the easiest part.
Yeah, I could see that. And a lot of people don't realize, because I ran a Kickstarter campaign a few years ago. It could be an emotional roller coaster because you build up your expectations, and
it wasn't so much that for me, and I think probably a big part of it was the book was done.
Mm-hmm.
So
that
the
helps.
book was going to happen either way.
Mm-hmm. And
I figured, I didn't know. I had no clue how it was going to go. I did have two previous Indiegogos that were a complete flop, and it was totally my fault because I had no clue what I was doing. But I didn't really know where this was going to go. And I knew the work was good, and I knew it was going to come out anyway. And I just figured, you can put in as much time as you want, but at some point you have to pull the plug and say, okay, enough for today, and get some sleep, enjoy your social life, visit with your family,
mm-hmm.
Eat a meal, and move on. And
right.
I just figured I'm going to put what seems to be a reasonable amount of time into this, and whatever happens, happens. So I didn't really experience that roller coaster. I kept it on an even keel, and being the age that I am, it's funny because there's kind of a paradox in that the older that you get, the less time you have in life, but the more patience you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it's kind of odd. I have more patience than I did when I had maybe 60, 70 years in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very patient with myself. I was patient with the world. I was patient with the internet. And it played out a little bit better than I thought it would play out. And I was very happy. But I never went to bed crying. Let me put it that way.
That's the part I didn't do right. Anyway, she wants to know also, what advice do you have for folks trying to crowdfund stuff?
I would ask a million questions like you're doing now, and if Cindy wants to contact me directly, I know we're Facebook friends, and get into it a little bit deeper, I can go into the details. But I would say have all your ducks in a row as far as the comic.
Yeah.
Make sure that you know what you're doing. Make sure that you feel that if crowdfunding didn't exist, this comic would happen anyway. So the crowdfunding can kind of be gravy, and don't make the crowdfunding something that like your life depends on it, because you're probably going to be disappointed.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And, I notice, as an aside, a lot of people in my circles, at least when they do crowdfunding, when they launch, they have probably 99% of the extra goodies ready, aside from sketches, of course.
Yep.
But, they have everything in. It's either in their laps or it's ordered and on the way. So preparation is key.
I had so little. The book was done, so that was just a question of printing it, and then there was sketches, which obviously would have to be done, and there's a mini poster, propaganda poster, which was drawn. So how hard is it to get that printed? Not a big deal. So to put all of this together, and one of the things that I did was, even though it was all done and the crowdfunding was ending at the very beginning of, beginning of May, beginning of June, beginning of July, I set the fulfillment date for October, figuring this way a lot of things can get in the way and I can still meet my target date. So that's another piece of advice, would be very realistic about your planning, and don't say, well, I'm not sure about that, but I hope it works out. That's hope. As they say, hope is not a plan.
That's true. Very good. And why did you? And a lot of people, when I'm asked about this sort of thing, we've got Indiegogo, we've got Kickstarter. What attracted you to Indiegogo over Kickstarter?
Yeah, good question. I'll try to remember, and I think it was the fact that you could have a very small goal, and even if you didn't make it, you could collect whatever money was pledged, and you could go in demand if you got to at least 500. So I think those were the big factors, and maybe some of the disbursement, the way the money is dispersed. I don't really remember the details of what led me to Indiegogo. I think probably the reason most people will do Kickstarter is I think there's just more people there. I think you're going to get a bigger audience looking at you. But I just decided, since Rammur #1 was going to happen anyway, that I would go for comfort and for ease of use, especially since I was doing this for the first time with no help whatsoever. Right. I did have a few people that had done this before that did give me some advice.
That's good.
But for the most part, you're kind of on your own.
Yeah. Now, did being on a platform with possibly a lower number of people that might look at your project, did that influence the amount that you were asking for?
No, what influenced the amount was I was a $500 goal, and that was based on you need to get to 500 to be able to go in demand. And I figured if I get 500, that will help support the printing, because the art was finished. But I got to about, I think it's something like 1,200, where
Nice.
where that means I can fulfill the project without going out of pocket, and have maybe 250 copies left over to sell beyond the crowdfunding. So it's kind of a break-even proposition, not counting the amount of money that went into the artwork. But as far as fulfilling it by printing and getting it out to people, it's kind of a break-even. But if I sell all 250 copies that are left over, then that's extra.
Excellent. Now, if you sell those 250, are you going to go back and do like print on demand as needed, or?
I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. I probably will print another few hundred, and I am looking at other distribution channels as well. Marcosi has been very kind in telling me not only can I do this floppy myself, in fact, what I told them is, I'll give you a reverse royalty. And they said, no, this is great publicity for the digital. It's great publicity for the eventual collection. Just go out, do whatever you want. And when I started talking to them about formal distribution through distribution channels, they said, fine, no problem. So they've been great about that.
That's fantastic. It's good to hear. That's really forward thinking. I'm really amazed. Yeah, it's like, thank God I'm sitting down, because you hear so many people trying to emulate the business model of Marvel and DC, lacking the 90 years and however many billions of dollars of experience they've got.
In fact, Marcosi is not even their trade paperbacks. They don't do floppies, but their trade paperbacks are not distributed in the United States by Diamond.
Oh, that's right.
You have to go through other sources to get it. Any comic book shop can get their stuff. They just can't get it through Diamond, because Marcosi doesn't like Diamond's deal.
I fully understand that. I've talked to Randy Zimmerman. I understand that.
I've been in close contact with Randy and Varian, especially over the last month or so.
Good. And we want to say hello to Grant Lankard. Glad you're here. And let's see. Let's go down the list. And Keisha Acuff, glad you're here. Mwah, the new co-host of Cryptid Crunch on the back of the Cereal Box Network. And Grant Lankard says, I'm not going to ask Brian what the dumbest thing an editor said to him, considering that I'm editing a story he submitted for a comic book.
What's the dumbest thing Grant has ever said to you?
Actually, Grant has been remarkably good, and especially with putting up with my artistic ego. Which I don't have a whole lot of actually, but I can defend my choices when I have to. Let's see, here we go. Cindy Cap has another question: are book fairs, Comic Cons, and so on happening in your area yet? America was starting to open up.
Well, there's I'm booked. I got my pro ticket for the New York Con, which is supposed to happen in October, and there's an Albany convention that will probably happen in November. So things are starting to open up.
That's cool. Very cool. And let's see here. Grant Langer says, if you ask 10 different people from that time who co-created Spider-Man, you'll get 10 different answers, probably from the same people. And yes, Dan Hollefeld, I got fingerprints on that comic book. Not only that, I got eye scratches on it because that's what good comics do. And yes, there's a show right now, Sarah. Sarah, glad you're here. And Grant Lankard, who also did a couple of successful crowdfunding campaigns last year.
I have an answer to that question. There's no question mark. There's no question mark at the end of that, but there's a question implicit in that statement. Yep. And I would say probably they do. They probably do. But you've got to balance the benefit versus what it takes to produce all of that. And I just decided, I could probably do more with more perks and more bells and more whistles, but then I would have to administrate it. And I just decided there just was not enough time, to do everything that probably could have been done. I would like to have more merchandise. There will be more merchandise in the future, and I did ask a lot of people about what are the best things to have as merchandise. Funny story, I was interviewed by a rather young woman who we were talking about merchandise, and I said, what do you think about Pogs?
Oh my God.
And she said, what? She had no idea what I was talking about.
Oh my God.
No idea what I was, so I explained what it was. But I will probably do. I designed a flag for the future police state in Rammur's universe. The police state is called the GFA, the Global Freedom Authority, and they run the world. And there is a flag I designed that will probably find its way onto a patch, and maybe a pin. An enamel pin, something like that. There will be more propaganda posters. The guy who did the poster for the first issue, his name is Matt Chick. He's based in New York. He's at work on a second one, and so there will be some merchandise. I'm thinking about a Rammur fan club that will have a membership card and a couple of buttons, stuff like that.
Excellent. I'm loving hearing this. And Grant Langer says, you may have made a mistake inviting people to ask you questions. You can ask Brian. We love to ask questions. Bring them on. That's why I have you people here. Come on, it's easier on me this way. And Pops Van Zandt from Comics Talk says, hey, yo, I know these guys.
Yeah, Pops was my first backer.
Oh, he usually is. He's good like that. Yeah. All right, and I just want the book.
It's coming. It's done.
So you are starting fulfillment right now? Is that it, or?
Well, it's going to get printed soon.
Okay, excellent.
And then it'll go out.
Yeah. And this is August, and
your
date was September.
I'm committed to October.
Oh, yeah, and I'm sure everybody's going to be pounding at your door with pitchforks and torches saying, you said October, and it's August and September. What were you thinking?
Well, it shouldn't be a problem because it is done. The only thing that's not done are the sketches, which are being done right now. But part of the reason for October is I wanted to give myself enough time to do this, but I also want to have it for the convention in New York. I wanted the printed copies with me when I go.
Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent. Now, one thing I do want to mention to everyone here, because part of our function here is educational. for people who haven't done some of this stuff. Notice planning. Notice planning. In fact, Charles and I wanted to get together earlier, but it just didn't jibe with the promotional schedule versus the Kickstarter and what I've got going, everything. So plan early, because you never know when the host is booked to show up for 3 months.
That's a really good point. And people talk about pre-launch. Mm-hmm. And I did at least 5 months of promotion pre-launch, because Marcosia published Rammur #1 digitally on December 31st. Mm-hmm. So that was 5 months before the launch of the campaign for the print version. So I had 5 months to kind of prime the pump for the campaign. Probably, getting back to Cindy's question, if I had to give her one big answer, I now know what it is. It's that you can't simply start your promotion with the launch.
Right.
You can't launch your campaign and then try to rustle up attention in the 30 or 60 days of your campaign. You have to have people well aware of you well before that, and you try to build a list, an email list, and a contact list with giveaways. I did a Rammur #0, which was 19 pages, included a couple of complete stories and previews to try to build my email list. So you've got to spend, the longer you can spend before you launch showing the world what it is you're going to do, the better off you're going to be when you eventually launch. So I would say that's probably the most important thing.
Agreed. Now, you just mentioned having a mailing list, which is, when I started doing this about 10 years ago, nobody was talking about mailing lists. Now, a lot of us are. We realize that's gold. That is absolute gold.
Oh, yeah.
Charles, you want to explain the value of a mailing list, even for a comic book creator, right? Anyone who's in the creative field should have one.
You've got a list, an email list of people who at some point express some sort of interest in you. Maybe they bought something, maybe they got something free, maybe they just made an inquiry. So you have these giveaways, and I use MailerLite, which is a program that I think if you have, once your list gets to 5,000 people, something like that, you have to pay.
Right.
But it's free if you keep it smaller than that. And you just have to build that list and make sure there's as many people as possible that you're able to reach out to personally. Facebook is great, but having emails is even better.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's like in my case, since I'm primarily prose, if something were, when we sell a book through Amazon, they don't share the information with us. And if something were to happen and it were to go away, what would we do?
Exactly.
Yep. And also Kickstarter and Indiegogo are great ways to grow your mailing list.
Yeah, and you get a physical address with Indiegogo. Everybody who backed me has to give me their mailing address so I can send them the book when it's printed.
Exactly. Now, do you have much? Well, Indiegogo is different because you have to tell them up front where you're at.
Yes.
Whereas Kickstarter, you have to send the survey out.
Yep.
Another advantage of Indiegogo is that Kickstarter collects the money at the end of the campaign, whereas Indiegogo grabs it right now.
Yes, so there is a certain waiting period after the end of the campaign. I'm not quite sure what Indiegogo is doing during that time period. I think they probably are double checking all the banking information you gave them 60 days ago.
Right.
To make sure that the tracks that you said were laid are there and still legitimate, so that they can get your money to you.
Right. I was hoping you'd say that they were using it for hookers and blow, but I'll settle for that answer.
Wouldn't surprise me.
It wouldn't me either. In fact, as long as they send me pictures, I'm good. And Pops Van Zandt says, awesome. And Charles is awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, I
Great
was
guy.
wondering. He answered my question. What's awesome?
Yeah,
Who's
you
awesome?
apparently. You are. And I'll agree with him. And Sarah, who got here late, how would you categorize your Rammur? If you had to give an elevator
Yeah,
pitch for it, what would it
crime.
be?
Well, the shortest elevator pitch in entertainment, 7 words: master thief in a future police state. It's a crime comic. It's a heist comic. It's a caper, except it's not a detective story. It's not a mystery, because in a mystery, you don't know who did it. In a crime story, you know who did it. You just don't know if they're going to get caught. So you're kind of seeing these stories from the perspective, from the point of view of Rammur, and you're kind of rooting for him because, yeah, he's a cold-blooded bastard and he's a thief, but he's not rolling drunks in an alley for quarters. He's generally robbing from people who are less admirable than he is. So you kind of root for him, kind of. You kind of look over his shoulder in these stories and follow him around. Just like in Dr. Strangelove, you're kind of rooting for the world to get blown up. You want that bomber to get through, and like you don't really think too much about the fact that you're rooting for the bomber to get through. But it's kind of the same idea. So it's a crime comic. It has a little bit of a superhero feel to it, a little bit of a science fiction feel to it. But if you like heist stories, caper stories, crime stories from the point of view of the criminal, that's what this is.
Yeah, reminds me, Rammur. Excuse me, Rammur reminds me a little bit of Clint Eastwood's The Man with No Name.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Rammur doesn't talk too much, but
Yeah,
he runs off at the mouth compared to Clint Eastwood, that's for sure, in those movies anyway. But he's kind of like that. That's a good analogy. Definitely a different type of setting, but a similar type of character.
yeah. Now, you mentioned being your own boss, and I have found in my own career, such as it is, that the more I do work for myself, other people want me to work for them and bring some of whatever I have learned. Do you find that you're getting offers from other people now, or are you courting other offers aside from packaging?
Yeah,
Perhaps?
both of those things. I have been approached, and I have approached other people about doing what I do for them, and they've approached me about doing what I do for them. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's just not a good fit.
Right.
It's about temperament and working styles. There was a bunch of guys that I did a little bit of work for, but their methods were kind of alien to me. I really couldn't figure out how to get into a groove with them, so it just was not meant to be. And we kind of parted on very good terms. We're still in touch, but I'm not working for them anymore. So it depends. There are some projects that it's a fit, and sometimes it isn't.
Well, folks, keep your questions coming. But in the meantime, I've got my own. And this is strictly personal because I'm a Edgar Rice Burroughs fan. I think every guy above the age of 12 probably should be, but or has or is. What you said you packaged like 3 different things for the Burroughs website, the comics there, which are
Correct.
really cool. Which ones are they?
The Girl from Hollywood, which is, I would call it a melodrama. It's really what it is, almost a soap opera. And Inspector Muldoon, which are closed door puzzle murder mystery stories.
Nice.
And The Girl from Pharisees, which is another soap opera melodrama set in Chicago in 1915. So I have to give my Filipino artist a lot of photo reference for that. And another one that we're doing is Forgotten. There's actually 4, because the murder mysteries, the Inspector Muldoon murder mysteries, were part of a bigger book called Forgotten Tales of Love and Murder. And there are a bunch of short stories in that are being adapted now, and I don't think they have started yet. They're still, I think they're still doing Inspector Muldoon. His stuff is really interesting. I knew very little about his work beyond the fantasy and science fiction stuff. I didn't realize he was kind of like the Stephen King of the 1920s. He was selling more than Hemingway, Fitzgerald, any of those guys, Steinbeck, any of them.
Yeah.
And he was big time.
Yeah, he was. And like myself, you mentioned those, and I'm like, oh my God, that's right. Because, a lot of people just think that all Lester Dent did was Doc Savage, or all that Walter Gibson did was The Shadow from that, similar milieu. But they had a ton of other things they were doing. Johnson Macaulay did a lot of other characters other than Zorro. And, they did a lot to keep the pot boiling back then. It's really fun to hear you mention those other things.
Yeah, in the 60s and 70s, when all the paperbacks were coming out of Edgar Rice Burroughs and Robert E. Howard, they would package them with cover art that made it look a little fantasy oriented, even if it wasn't.
Right.
So you would buy it if they put covers on these things that were more appropriate to the material. You'd never purchase it. But the writing is it's easy to read stuff. It moves pretty quickly. It is okay. It's a little bit dated. This stuff was written in the 20s. Some of it was written in the 30s, and it's a little bit. Some of the stuff is a little bit archaic, but it's a good read. And Edgar Rice Burroughs was an entertainer first and foremost.
That's great. Now, are you writing these features as well?
Adapting them.
Adapting
them, and editing. Really packaging them and delivering a finished product every month to Edgar Rice Burroughs.
That's awesome.
They're proofreading them. That's about it.
Okay.
Every once in a while they'll have a question. They'll say, I don't know, this is kind of weird, and then I'll say, it's right. It's right from the book. Mm-hmm. It's exactly from the book.
Right.
I didn't change anything.
Yeah, because I've heard that Burroughs can be real sticklers about sticking to the original text, which I understand.
Yeah, and for the most part I do. Every once in a while I will have to change something a tiny, tiny little bit because maybe the spelling is archaic.
Right.
Or the terminology just doesn't make any sense anymore. Mm-hmm. And there was a couple of politically incorrect racial references that had to be changed.
Okay.
Not that many, though.
Which is, given a lot, not a lot, I should say, for the writing of that time. That's rather remarkable, actually.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that they were as progressive as they were, these stories.
Yeah.
There was, I think there was a character who was Italian, and I can't remember what the reference was, but it was the terminology was not favorable.
Right.
I can't remember the word that was used, but But there's remarkably little of that in these stories.
That's interesting. That's very, very cool. And speaking of very cool, there's Jeffrey Hayes of Plasma Fire Graphics when the look of your book matters to you. Good evening, Charles and Brian. Late but listening intently. We're glad you made it. We're glad you made it, my man. It's like, how do you get around not so much the archaics? Well, actually, let's call it the archaic stuff, and especially the stuff that now would be looked upon it with disdain. The racial and ethnic
there's not
things.
that much of it. There really isn't that much of it, and you do have the advantage in comics of showing something. If something was a little hard to understand in prose, if I can figure it out, then I can show it, mm-hmm. and so now I'm showing it. So now it should be crystal clear. The puzzle stories, the murder mysteries, Inspector Muldoon, those stories are impossible to figure out. You could read them 10 times, and then you're trying to figure out how Inspector Muldoon figured it out based on the convoluted logic of the evidence that he heard. And I had discussions with the Edgar Rice Burroughs people where they said I can't figure out this story. I said, I know. I said, just let it go. You're never going to figure them out. I'm going to adapt them straightforward. It's all going to be there, and I can't figure them out. I'm just going to get them illustrated word for word. The visual approach I used for those stories, because they had to be prose heavy, was if you remember the Pictofiction magazines that EC did.
Yes.
In the 50s.
Yeah.
I did them in that style with the instead of word balloons and captions, they're just kind of illustrated text or text on top of illustrations, depending on how you look at it.
Right.
And each story, which ran, let's say, anywhere from 15 to 25 installments, weekly installments, had its own color scheme, a single monotone color. So it was either a red or green, which is the way those Pictofiction magazines were done.
Right.
That worked very nicely for that strip. When I first approached those stories and was told to adapt them, it was driving me out of my mind, because I could not figure out how do I do this, because it's going to be just page after page after page of people talking. That's all it is. There's no action whatsoever.
Right.
So then I figured, well, if I use this illustrated text approach, that'll work for this. And so I showed them the Pictofiction from an EC story, and then I showed them a single page of the Edgar Rice Burroughs stuff done that way, and they thought it was okay, and so we moved on.
That's great.
But that was one of the I've done a lot of adaptations. That was the toughest adaptation I ever had to do, just to figure out how to do it.
Oh, I'm sure. Now, are there other Burroughs properties that you have your eye on? Because these, knowing that he wrote, Burroughs wrote what was it, 25, 26 Tarzan books. He wrote 5 Carson of Venus things. He had a finite number of works, and this. He obviously, he did not do as many of these stories as he did some of the more familiar characters like John Carter. Are there other properties that you have your eye on?
Yeah, they're doing so far. They're doing about 24 weekly strips. There are other properties that have not been adapted yet that I do have my eye on. And some of them I'm looking at for webcomics, and some of them I'm actually looking at as potential graphic novels. And we are talking to certain publishers about doing graphic novels based on some of these properties. So yeah, there's certainly more that can come out of this.
That's cool. Well, let's get back to Rammur for a minute if
Sure.
we can. Yeah, we might as well, right? It's why we're here, right? But anyway, no, seriously, what kind of stories do you see yourself telling? Do you see yourself telling any sort of stories, like, say, outside of crime fiction with Rammur? Do you see yourself, exploring other genres, but in that same, kind of science fiction-y, heavy metal setting?
Well, the Rammur stories are going to be pretty strictly crime stories. The first 3 issues, the lead story for the first 3 issues, are very loosely connected. Even though all the Rammur stories and every story in the first issue, it's 48 pages and there's 4 stories. They're all self-contained stories. The lead story in the second issue will be a direct sequel to the first one, but you do not have to read the first story to read the follow-up. There'll be maybe a caption that brings you up to speed.
Good.
And then the third story, which is being drawn now, is also a sequel to the first two, but again, self-contained, maybe a paragraph to bring you up to speed. That was not planned or intentional. It just worked out that way, because in the first story, Rammur's hired to steal something from a museum. We don't know the name of the person who hired him, and we never see that person. But in the second story, he goes back to that person to explain how this didn't work out. And that person, now we see him, and he has a name, and he wants Rammur to do something else for him, which Rammur very reluctantly does. And in the third story, again, we don't see that bad guy who hired Rammur, but he's mentioned, and the story starts at one of his estates. He's not there, but he's mentioned, and the story involves some people who work for that guy. So it's loosely connected. It'll probably end up being called a trilogy, which is not bad for marketing. But the other stories, the feature within Rammur is called Top's Tales of the Police State. And these are funky, depressing little vignettes about what it is like to live in an authoritarian police state. Rammur's not in these stories. It's just short stories, 4 pages, 2 pages, just these little slices of life about what it's like to live under the boot heel of the police state. So these are stories designed for anybody that feels like Rammur is a guilty pleasure and they like thoughtful Fantagraphic style. Not that there's anything wrong with Fantagraphics. They've been one of my best publishers. But if they want that sort of story, that's what Tales of the Police State are all about. So they'll be in the first issue. There's 2 stories, 2 top stories, a 4-pager and a 2-pager, self-contained. So you've got a 24-page lead Rammur story, a 6-page backup Rammur story, 4-page tops, 2-page tops, some making of stuff, alternate cover. Tops has its own cover in there, propaganda poster. So it's a really nice package. But I defy today's comic book writers to write a 6-page self-contained story. How about a 4-page? How about a 4-page self-contained story? How about a 2-page self-contained story? Not easy.
No, it's not.
You've got to establish an entire conflict and character or characters on page 1. And then and develop and resolve the conflict on page 2.
Yes.
And you can't have the reader saying, "Where's the rest of it?"
Yep.
Not easy.
Exactly. Well, not everybody is Will Eisner,
Yeah, one of the great geniuses. His stuff is so amazing. And some of those spirit stories are just
yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Shame about Ebony, though.
Yeah. We've had discussions on this show and on my Thursday night show, Clever Title Pending, 7:00 Eastern time on this network. Tune in. Hashtag always promote. But yeah, we've had some discussions about Ebony. He's a great character. He's a super character.
I know, and I predict though, if things keep going the way they're going, there will be no Eisner Award anymore. He will just be too politically incorrect.
Yeah, and that would be a shame.
It would be a shame, but would it surprise you if that happened?
Not with the current political, socio-political climate. Not just here in America, but globally. I can fully see that. I just hope it doesn't happen in my lifetime.
I think if it doesn't happen in the next few years, it probably won't happen, because I think that the pendulum is going to start swinging back the other way. Have you ever seen the movie Ghost World, based on the graphic novel?
Oh, yes.
Yes. And the politically incorrect art that's brought into the class, into the art class.
Right.
That movie dealt with that topic so perfectly.
Yep.
Because on the one hand, yeah, this stuff can't fly today, but on the other hand, it exists, and it existed, and we need to look at it in the context that it was created. We can't dig a hole and bury it.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting from a cultural point of view. It might even be interesting from an aesthetic and artistic point of view, because it might be a beautifully rendered piece of art.
Right.
So, and I thought that movie dealt with that very, very nicely.
Yeah. And, it's, to me, it also goes back to the thing about those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. That we need to be cognizant of the feelings of others. I'm not promoting hypersensitivity, of course, but, the people that find fault behind every corner. But, this, like you said, the stuff happened. And to me, it's like Mark Twain. A lot of his word choices in Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn to us are very unfortunate.
Or Blazing Saddles.
Yeah, Blazing Saddles. Yeah, if they took all the non-PCs,
can't make that movie today.
Oh God, no! And if they cut all the raunch, the bad stuff out,
and they do when it's on network.
Oh, and that's criminal.
It just completely, even when it's on cable, they just some cable stations, they just bleep all those all those words, and
that hurts.
A lot of times we watch movies from my wife and I will watch movies from the 70s, and we're constantly saying, couldn't do that today, couldn't do that today, couldn't do.
Yeah.
We just watched there's a fantastic movie with George Segal and what's her name? Where's Papa?
Oh my God! Yes, I'd forgotten about that film. Yeah,
I had seen it when it came out, and just early 70s, and I just recently saw it again. My wife watched it for the first time. We really enjoyed it, but boy, we're just shaking our heads saying you just could not make this movie today.
Yeah. Well, you could if Eisner were alive, he could do The Spirit, but he would have to redraw Ebony to be a lot more realistic, which wouldn't take away from his charm or his usefulness.
Same character,
yeah. So it's that hurts. And Sarah makes a point here. I wonder what things we say today will be against PC in the future. Very interesting thing to ponder. As I've said for years, if anyone's gone through my social media and not canceled me yet, it's only because they aren't trying.
It probably wouldn't take too much thought to figure out exactly what we're saying today. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
You can say skin color, okay? You can say somebody's white.
Right.
You can say somebody's black. Those are two colors. But you can't say somebody's red, and you can't say somebody's yellow.
Yes.
Now, Negro used to be okay.
Yeah.
That's not okay.
When I was a teen,
okay anymore. Right.
Yeah, when I was a kid, Negro was the accepted term.
Yes.
So
you can't say that anymore. So
right.
Excuse me. Black might be, for a while it looked like black was going to become African American.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was going to be the term, but now that went the other way. So it's hard to say. It probably would be very surprising in some cases, and maybe not so surprising in other cases as to what in the future or even near future will, you just won't be able to say.
Right. That's why I tell people right now: create fearlessly.
Oh, I was watching an interview, Dick Cavett interview.
Oh God, I love
just
Dick
last night.
Yeah.
Excuse me, or the night before. And he was talking to somebody whose son was in the Special Olympics, and he described his son unflinchingly as retarded.
Yeah.
Now this would have been a good 35, 40 years ago.
Right.
And that was a term.
Yeah.
That's not a term you can use anymore.
No.
So once what happens is when the current term, whatever it is, that's okay, become attached, very attached to something we're uncomfortable with,
Right.
then eventually we become uncomfortable with that term.
Yeah.
And we have to have a new term, because what it is, we're uncomfortable about what it is that the term is attached to. So we have to move on and make a new term that we're okay with.
Right. Yeah, and then just try to keep up with the terms.
Yes.
It's like like LGBTQ. It took me a long time to get that in the right order.
It becomes an alphabet soup. Yes.
Yeah, it sounds like some sort of secret organization now, like the Man from U.N.C.L.E. or Thunder Agents or something. So yeah, and Sarah, we all wonder what's going to be banned in schools, what books will be banned in schools in the future that are acceptable today. I mean, look at the fight, for banned books, right now. Like I mentioned, Mark Twain earlier, and even like Blazing Saddles, like Charles mentioned. The unfortunate thing is in blanket censorship like that of these books. The thing is, these books were making a point about that sort of mindset.
Yes.
When Cleavon Lil's got the gun to his head, he's not celebrating it, So let's see. And Cindy Gap says, man, these thieves, someone stole my mood ring and now I don't even know how I feel about it. And let's see. And here we go. Yes, and Sarah said she had to correct her dad before heading to Champaign, Illinois, the University of Illinois one day. Those are fighting words in a diverse area. Yeah, and then you also have like terms that are used in rap music where the speaker can use that.
Yes.
Their friends and family can use that. But people outside that demographic cannot.
And black comedians can use that word.
Exactly.
Well, there's what's his name? Last name Mulrooney, the comedian.
Oh yeah, I know who you mean.
He's got a great joke where he said he was going to be on a TV show doing some comedy thing, and he wanted to use the word midget. And the producer said, "You can't use the word midget. That's as bad as the N-word."
Right.
And Mulrooney said, "It isn't, and I can prove it." Because you just said the word midget, but you couldn't say.
Yeah, that's true.
You couldn't say the word that you were referring to.
That is true. That is true. Yeah. And what we write today, when somebody adapts our stuff later down the road, we're going to be giving them fits.
Sure.
So, and exactly, so Sarah, it's about the times. It's not like those words were said in a modern setting. But that's the thing, though. People take those words in a modern context.
Yeah, well, I've gotten some criticism for Rammur being anti-women, but as I pointed out to anybody that has actually read it, there's quite a few female characters in it that are very well developed characters who take no crap from men at all. And does Rammur look down on women? Yeah, he looks down on everybody. He has one use for people, that is, if they can help him in his caper, great. If they can't, that's okay. And if they're in his way, that's a problem. But the female characters in the story are intelligent. They're resourceful. They're clever.
Very.
Some are pretty immoral or amoral. Others are very moral characters. But they're all their own people, and they're none of them are subservient to men.
Right. Yeah. They're people is what it is.
Yeah.
They're real people.
They're all different.
Yeah. I mean, I dug the sample you sent me. That was good stuff to read.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, it's like, it reminded me, there's a British comedian I like named Jonathan Pye, who his shtick is he is a BBC reporter, and then he delivers these obscenity-filled rants when he's off camera. It's hilarious stuff and very, very insightful. But he also did a tour before the COVID in Great Britain, where he was explaining political correctness to the audience, and it got to mansplaining. And he was telling them that mansplaining is when a man talks down to a woman to try to educate them. He said, I do not talk down to women. I talk down to everyone. It's not mansplaining. It is explaining.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned BBC reporters.
Mm-hmm.
My first exposure before I ever saw a BBC reporter was the Monty Python parodies.
Yeah.
So when I eventually saw actual BBC reporters, I couldn't take them seriously. Because Monty Python did such a great job of making fun of them that they became it for me.
Oh my God, yeah. And watching Chevy Chase on the original Saturday Night Live as the weekend anchor, I think what made it so effective was the fact he could emulate American anchormen so accurately in their tone and delivery. Let's see here. No, we're not doing manscaping. That's something else, Sarah. That's a whole nother program. That'll be After Dark. That'll be the After Dark edition, $2.99 a minute. Christian illusionist Jake Lindsay asks, how do you develop your characters? What's your process for creating individualistic characters such as you do?
Boy, that's
you have 30 seconds.
Yeah. Okay.
No pressure.
Yeah, I guess you get these flashes, So let's say it's going to be a Rammur story. I already have Rammur, but okay, so who are the other characters going to be? So I get a premise, a notion that I start with. What if Rammur is hired to rob something from a museum? Okay, so who hired him? What would that character be like? The characters are in service to the notion, the essence of the story. I start out with a 25-word description of the story.
Yep.
And I don't start even developing the plot until that 25-word description is so compelling that I have to write the story. So then what do I need? What characters do I need to suit the purpose, suit the idea, and develop this idea? So I have somebody hires Rammur. What's that guy going to be like? What makes sense in the context of the genre, in the context of Rammur's universe, and in the context of this particular story? So I'm developing that character, and I want him to be interesting. I don't want him to be more interesting than Rammur. And that's a difference in Rammur than in most, let's say, superhero comics, where Spider-Man's villains are really interesting. His early villains, maybe even more interesting than him. Yeah. And there's a cliche that the villains are more interesting than the hero, but not in Rammur. Yeah. The villains, most of these people are going to die, so don't get attached to them. So
George R. R. Martin of comics.
Exactly. They got to be interesting, and they got to be interesting enough to keep you interested in the story and the character, and strong enough to go up against Rammur. But they're probably going to be perishing, so don't get attached to them. So once I've got, let's say in that particular story, I've got the idea for who hires him. All right. Well, in the very first scene, he's confronted by two guys who found out about this caper and meet him there to rob the thing themselves. So what kinds of characters would do that? These are basically thugs who are just intelligent enough to be dangerous to themselves. They're not the brightest bulbs. They think they are. Okay, so again, those characters are being developed for the needs of the story. It's got to be two guys that Rammur's able to take out because he's smarter and better than they are. Right. But they were smart enough to figure out what was going to happen that night and to be there and to almost pull it off. So, so now we're going to move on. So after the robbery, what's going to happen next? We need more characters. So Rammur has this gear, this ram scoop and his wrist blasters, leg jets, compact fusion reactor. Well, he's got to have somebody that services this stuff. So what kind of character would that be? What kind of person, what kind of mechanic would Rammur trust enough and that person be skilled enough? And he'd have to be a criminal in some respects. He's probably going to have a front, a legit front, but he does this work for criminals on the side. So that's another character developed out of the needs of the genre, the needs of the Rammur's universe, and the needs of this particular story. And then let's make it more complicated. Rammur goes there, the guy's not there. Who's there? His assistant, a cute young girl who's really good at fixing this gear, but her boss doesn't trust her yet because he's an SOB. Okay, so again, more character development in needs of the story. It's interesting. It moves the story along. So the characters are developed out of the structure of the story and the needs of the story, and you've got to make it seem as if the characters are driving the story. And at some point they do. At some point they take over. Once you've established them, then you realize, oh, how about if this character does that? That would be interesting. So the character, once you've created the character, then the character starts to take on a life of his or her own and suggest plot twists that make the story interesting and complicate the story. So I hope that answers the question.
That's one of the best explanations I've ever heard, sir.
Well,
seriously. Seriously.
And that
is great.
And that was not prefab. That was not in my talking points. That was completely spontaneous.
There we go. Very good. Very cool. Well, yeah, and the needs of the story, I think, is the key to it. That you build it up to a certain point and then let the characters take over and change them so that they do propel the story forward. I think that's
there
great.
will be some continuing characters, and some of them will be partners in crime of Rammur. And does he trust them? He doesn't really trust anybody, but he trusts them for the purposes of whatever his needs and desires are at the moment. And occasionally there'll be a bad guy that or an adversary of Rammur's that does continue on. But for the most part, these are self-contained stories. I'm not trying to build a huge cast of characters that are going to travel from story to story. My stories are very, very underpopulated. The first story is 24 pages, and there's basically 3 main characters in 24 pages.
Yeah.
There's a couple of minor characters that pop in and out, but it's basically a 3-character play.
Very cool. Well, let's see. We've got some more comments here in our dwindling hours. Cindy Cap says, PC annoys me. I'm disabled, and people have grouched at me for calling myself gimpy, crippled, handicapped. And if someone calls me handy-capable again, and now she's mapping the bottom of her brain with her eye rolls. So I understand that. Yeah.
Hey, well, you should be able to identify any way you want to identify. It's right. You. And isn't that what PC is all about? Is identifying what you are, the way you are comfortable identifying. And if they're not comfortable with it, screw them.
That's right. Who cares what other people think if they don't think right? And Cindy Kemp says, did you hear about the art thieves that got caught? They didn't have the Monet for Degas to make the van go. And let's see, we read that one. And no, Sarah, I'm not reading Pillow Pants either. Let's see. Well, I think this goes more towards your past work, I would say. So from Christian Lucius Jake Lindsay, is there a character you don't like writing about but people want you to use in your books? Like, for instance, you wrote Conan back in the day.
Yeah.
You wrote some issues of Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah.
Were there characters in there, for instance, that you they serve the purpose of the story, but you didn't necessarily really want to write them? Or do you just find a way like around that?
Yeah, we didn't have anything forced on us with Conan, and we did seven. I did 7 issues. They were all self-contained stories, and there was not a single character other than Conan who had ever appeared in the book before. So we didn't really have that problem. Now, I really haven't been saddled. I've been lucky that I haven't been saddled with any characters that I didn't want to write. I co-created a character for a Filipino publisher, and she was kind of a sea goddess, given powers by another sea goddess. She started out as a normal human being, and I was given a small cast of characters in that, but they had never appeared anywhere before, so I was able to develop them from the ground up. So I could develop them in a way that I saw fit, and I was happy with and comfortable with. But no, I've never been forced to write a character that I wasn't comfortable with.
Excellent. Okay, very good. 2 more questions here. Another one from Jake Lindsay. What type of movies do you get inspiration from?
All. And sometimes it's negative inspiration. Sometimes you are inspired by something you don't like, not to emulate.
Yeah.
But I enjoy comedies, dramas, science fiction, westerns. The genre is not a real problem. I just like an interesting story with interesting characters and something that I think the biggest problem for me with a movie is when it violates its own rules.
Yeah.
Because every movie has its own set of rules, and sometimes, the whole typical talking to the fourth wall, well, that can work or not work in a movie, but sometimes, and of course I can't think of an example right now, but when a movie violates its own rules or just has a plot hole so big that I can't get past it. But I would say, to answer the question directly, any type of movie could potentially be an inspiration.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and like the Jeffersons airplane used to say, feed your head.
Exactly.
Everything becomes inspiration. And Cindy Cap asks, who's your favorite character to write of all the ones you've done? What's your favorite?
Well, that I didn't create, Conan.
Or that you did create, or either one did or didn't create.
That I didn't create, Conan. That I did create, certainly Rammur. And the reason that Rammur is so much fun is it's the first thing that I've done, even creating, that I haven't collaborated with somebody on the direction of the work. Everything else that I've worked on, there's been a co-boss at least, and Rammur's the first thing where I'm 100% calling the shots as to what happens, and that's a tremendous amount of responsibility, but it's also a tremendous amount of freedom. So there's no compromise with Rammur. There's nothing about Rammur that I have to say, well, if I completely had my way, I might do this a little bit. No. Rammur is 100% exactly the way I want it to be, for better or worse.
That's great. And we got a couple good questions here. And Sarah asks, how long have you been writing? When was your first written thing?
First published work would have been for Marvel in '86. My first sale, Marvel '86, and that would have been that Jack London pastiche for Savage Tales Volume 2. I had been trying to get published. I had been pitching stories since probably 81 or 82, and finally got something sold by '86. Yeah. Yep.
Very good. And then last one from our audience here, we're going to give it to Cindy Cap. What's the best advice you have? And she also asks, what's the best and the worst advice you've ever received?
Yeah, the best advice relating strictly to writing in comics would have been what I mentioned before, Larry Hama. Just write more, more, just write. Another great piece of advice I got from an editor at a regular book publisher. I would bring these projects in, and I was young and ambitious and energetic, and I would get really disappointed if a project wasn't going to happen.
Right.
And this guy, who was really a veteran of publishing, and he was at the end of his career. He was at the time, I think he was in his early 60s, which in 1982, 83, pretty close to retirement.
Right.
And he said something to me. He said, "There's always another trolley coming around the corner."
That's true.
Don't be disappointed about this project not happening. And I looked up that phrase to see if it was a thing. And apparently nobody in the history of the world has said that except him.
Really?
But I've repeated it many, many times. Worst piece of advice?
Aside from being on this show.
Yeah. No, that was a good idea.
I think
so far.
So far, so good.
Let's see. Worst piece of advice. Boy.
Maybe you never got bad advice.
Yeah,
good for
no,
you.
there's so much. It's
yeah. 2 hours later.
It might have been giving a character a pet, something stupid like just completely destroying the whole idea. You remember the Simpsons episode where they have they force a funky dog, a hip dog character into the show.
Right.
Yeah,
yes.
that sort of. I've had editors suggest that
Oh,
dumb sort of thing. Yeah, editors are always good at bad editors are good at giving bad advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tough to come up with something real specific though.
That's all right. That's all right. And we got another buddy of ours here, Phil Leon. How goes it, peeps? Good to see you here, Phil. Always a pleasure, sir. And yes, my friend here worked for Marvel. Love you to the abyss and back too. And yeah, we'll be talking, Sarah. I promise. And I'm sure to be talking to Charles again in the future. I have a couple more questions. How long do you see yourself writing Rammur?
This is for the long haul. This
Good.
is I will do other things, but I'll keep doing this because I think it's a real solid idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's a simple idea, master thief in a future police state.
Yeah.
It is not like anything else that's out there.
Right.
A lot of things that are out there, people will describe it as, well, it's a kind of combination of this and that, and those two things are usually things you've heard of that are popular. But this is kind of out there by itself, and it is starting to find an audience and a hardcore following. And if you don't like it, then it's not for you. If you do like it, if you like this sort of thing, this is, I think, really going to be for you. And I do think it's starting to catch on. These things never catch on fast enough for you.
Oh no.
But I'm very happy with the response I've had so far.
That's great. Well, and that goes back to something I tell people constantly, especially now with the technology that we've got that gets our work out to the public, in that create what you want to create. Create
for yourself.
Yeah.
What interests you.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. The books you want to read.
Right. A bookstore, if you were to walk into a bookstore, a comic book store, and if you saw this, if I saw this, and I hadn't created it, and it just appeared, I would have snapped this up in 5 seconds, and I would have said, finally, somebody's created something precisely for me.
Exactly. Don't follow the trend, people. Be the trend. Exactly. So anyway, Cindy Kep says, thanks for hosting the adventures. Cindy, sorry we didn't get to all your jokes, but thank you, darling, for being here. Much appreciated. Mwah, CKOEPP.com. Great newsletter. 22 days until the next one. Sign up now. Don't miss it. And let's see. And here we go. I'm going to let her have the last word even. Create something that doesn't freaking come true the moment it's written. There we go. Yeah. Let's have the fantasy thing going here. So,
well, this happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
It happens to me all the time where I will write something and then, I mean, I had to change something right before 9/11. I wrote something that I was in the middle of, and it was like when 9/11 happened, I said, okay, I got to throw that in the garbage.
Oh yeah,
it happens a lot.
Yeah, it can happen. Yeah, sometimes we are prophets more than we understand. So anyway, Charles Santino, do you want me to run your video one more time?
Yeah, that would be great.
All right, let's be great then. Here we go. We're gonna crank this back up here. Let it fill the screen, and it's almost like I knew what I was doing here. Get off there, and here we go. That is Rammur, available right now on Indiegogo. Please go there. In fact, go to this very address that's about to pop up on your screen here. Right there. Indiegogo.com/projects/Rammur-1 and then number sign. And put that / in there too. It feels good. So anyway, check out that it's now in demand, right? That's the term.
That is correct.
And you can pick up that issue, the floppy, right now. Don't wait for the movie to come out. So Charles, I'm going to give you the spotlight one more time. And first of all, thank you so much for being here. I'm glad we could mesh our schedules for this one. It's been a lot of fun for me, and I hope it has for you. But we're going to give the spotlight one more time and tell people how they can keep up with you and follow your amazing exploits.
Yeah, well, on Facebook, I'm Charles Santino. Also, Rammur and Top's Tales of the Police State is a Facebook page. On Twitter, I am at Charles_Santino. And Instagram, Charles Santino, all one word. I did want to mention, we saw a couple of pictures of Dominatra, Dami, in that propaganda poster. She is the big sister of the future police state, the Global Freedom Authority, and she may or may not be real. There are images of her everywhere, statues, posters. She's even on the money. So I did want to mention her, and that the propaganda poster, which is one of the perks, is of her. That was designed by Matt Chick of New York City.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, and Sarah just noticed the hat. Nice touch.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because I've been doing so many of these interviews, and when my image pops up on the screen, I've been waiting for somebody, especially a host, to say, so what is it you're promoting again?
You're too subtle for me, Charles. That's what it is. Says the guy in the fez that doesn't write anything about people with fezzes. So anyway, Charles, thank you again for being here. It has been an absolute delight.
It was really good.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Please stick around for a moment so I can say goodnight to you properly. And I'm going to mute you, and I will take over the screen. And I'm getting a lot of email notices, so if I look distracted, that's why. But anyway, thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for your great jokes and questions and such. And thank you, as always, to Plasma Fire Graphics, Jeffrey Hayes and Plasma Fire Graphics, when the look of your book matters to you. Plasma Fire Graphics for a great look to your book, whether it's a wraparound cover for a paperback or hardcover, or it's the graphics you need to sell your stuff, or a beautiful trailer like you just saw. Please check out Plasma Fire Graphics on Facebook, also on the interwebs, plasmafiregraphics.com. Jeffrey Hayes is sitting by waiting for your call. He's the one that did my latest book here, Snow Ambition, latest in the Snow Short series, a quick read crime thriller, only 99 cents on Amazon. You will love it. But anyway, check it out. Plasma Fire Graphics, when the look of your book matters to you, because it matters to your readers. And also, something that matters is the Rising Tide Broadcast Network. Please check out our Facebook page and give it a like and follow us. We've got entertainment and information 7 days a week. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern, it'll be me back with a live edition of Nevermind the Furthermore. And we're going to have another package reveal tomorrow. Oh my gosh, I can barely wait. I know it's in it. It's going to be cool. And also tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Eastern again will be The Truthmongers with Ted Davies and Glenn B. Fleming. Tune into that. That's always fascinating conversation about tall tales and rumors and conspiracies. It's great. Also, people who are great are our Patreon patrons. Patreon is a monthly subscription service that allows you to support your favorite creators directly with a modest financial contribution. And it helps keep this show on the air and helps the Rising Tide mission move forward. We appreciate each and every one of you. But we also give you stuff in return for your support, not just our love, but other things like looks at works in progress, a peek at our exclusive blog, Every Blog Deserves a Name, and other goodies. So please check out our rewards at www.patreon.com/Brian K. Morris. And again, thank you very much to Charles Santino for being here. Next week, we are going to have a return of a pair of great guests, Bobby Nash and Charles F. Milhouse, two big names in the new pulp writing movement. And you loved them before, you're going to love them again. Brace yourselves, bring drinks and food. It's going to be a long night. But anyway, and it's going to be a fun one too. So please tune in next week to Clever Title Pending. We'll be back at the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. And as I scroll down to where I need to be, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who tuned in. Please share, like, subscribe to this channel. We're on the move again this way, and be sure to ring the bell on YouTube so that you're notified of all the cool things we've got coming up. And so, as always, in closing, folks, I wish you all a good evening and hope that you stay smart, stay safe, wash your hands, and never apologize for being awesome. Thank you for watching Clever Title Pending. We'll see you next week. Take care, everyone.